A dark-skinned old hag like you thinks you have the right to claim a house. Wake up, Eleanor. You're nothing but a parasite living off my husband. That was what Alicia, the most venomous daughter-in-law America has ever produced, spat in my face before she kicked me out of the SUV at the airport, leaving me in the crowd as if I were a broken piece of luggage. She thought I'd sit there and cry. No, because the moment she smirked and said, "No one will believe you." "You're useless." I tightened my grip on the recorder in my hand. Every scheme, every insult, every detail of her plan to steal my home was captured word for word. And the thing Alicia fears the most is the thing she doesn't know. I am not the useless old woman she thinks. I am Eleanor Marston, the silent hero of America. A woman who once carried dozens of people out of a Category 5 hurricane does not bow to a monster like her. If it were you, would you lower your head to a traitor or stand before 500 people and crush her with the truth? Follow now. Comment, "No one tramples justice." I never thought that at the end of my life I would be standing alone in the middle of an airport, my hand trembling on an old suitcase, abandoned by the very people I spent my youth raising, thrown away like broken luggage. I once faced Category 5 hurricanes, flash floods, wildfires. I once carried strangers on my back out of death zones. But no natural disaster was as cruel as the moment Alicia shoved me out of the car as if I was no longer human. The SUV paused for a moment, then came to a complete stop. The door opened not to welcome me in, but to throw me out. Alicia leaned over, her face reflecting a cold, metallic disdain. She didn't shout or curse, she simply curved her lips into a smile that froze every vein inside me. "Get out, Eleanor. From now on, you survive on your own." I stood there for a few seconds, unable to believe what I had just heard. Her voice didn't need volume or sharpness yet. That sentence cut deeper than any blade I'd ever seen. A few short words, enough to strip away every drop of trust I had left in the thing called family. The SUV sped off, dragging dust and my dignity behind it. I watched until it became a small dot, then disappeared. In that moment, the years I spent raising Nathan, the nights I stayed awake during his fevers, the meals I saved every penny to prepare, all rose in front of me, then shattered instantly like glass hitting the floor. Nothing intact, nothing left to pick up. I pulled my suitcase aside to avoid the crowd. The afternoon airport was cold and vast, making me feel like I was standing in an empty desert. I saw families going on trips, parents hugging children, hands held together, laughter echoing. Meanwhile, I stood alone, as if life itself had decided I no longer belonged in this world. My phone buzzed. I thought it was Nathan apologizing, thought maybe he had a shred of conscience left. But when I opened the screen, my heart sank so heavily, I wondered if it still beat at all. "The house isn't yours anymore. Don't come back. Don't bother us." I read it once, then again, but the words didn't change. Harsh, cold, stripped of humanity. A message from the very child I carried for months, the one I believed would protect his mother for life, now the first to strike me down. My throat tightened as if someone was squeezing it. A mother who carried a household for decades, now evicted from the very house she built through a heartless text message. I watched the people flowing past me, each face unfamiliar, each step indifferent. Everything moved quickly while I remained frozen in the most painful moment of my life. The chill outside wasn't as cold as the chill crawling up my spine. It touched old memories, old wounds, old sacrifices. No one understands the feeling of your own flesh and blood turning their back on you, yet I felt it clearly like a slap across the soul. Cold, painfully cold, as if I had just been pushed out of my own life. I wondered why. What had I done to deserve this? I had spent years protecting strangers in disasters, pulling them away from death, yet I couldn't save myself from the betrayal inside my own family. If natural disasters strike without warning, betrayal is worse. It looks you in the eyes before it smiles. I sat down on a metal bench, still gripping my suitcase, as if it was the only thing left that belonged to me. I breathed deeply, trying not to collapse in the middle of the airport. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. Pain doesn't disappear by freezing. And I'm not the type of woman who lets herself be pushed aside and stay there. My phone screen dimmed, but those lines remained burned into my mind like a scorch mark. Alicia had planned this for a long time. She didn't just kick me out. She wanted me to disappear completely so she could live comfortably in the house I built with my youth. And Nathan, my only son, allowed it. I stood up. My legs trembled slightly, but my resolve didn't. I had survived storms big enough to wipe towns off the map. I would not break because of two ungrateful people who couldn't understand love if it hit them in the face. I tested the suitcase handle. Its wheels squeaked as if agreeing with me. I walked out of the airport. Each step grew heavier with determination. I would go back. I would look the truth in the eye, and I would see exactly what they thought they stole from me. I pulled my suitcase home, ready to see what they had taken. I returned to my old neighborhood when the sky was turning dusk, the last gold of the day spilling over familiar roofs. But the one thing no longer familiar to me was the house I had lived in for nearly 40 years. The white fence out front was still standing, yet it looked at me as if I were a stranger. I walked to the front door, my palm damp from the cold and from the unease rising inside me. The lock before me was completely different. The color, the size, even the dry, lifeless sound when I tried turning the handle all felt foreign. No one told me the locks had been changed, and no one gave me a new key. The house no longer recognized me, and that feeling was like someone cutting away a piece of my memory and tossing it aside. I leaned toward the glass pane. The curtains were shut, the furniture rearranged, some of my belongings no longer where they used to be. I stood there like a ghost in front of what once was my real life. I stepped back, staring at the house in silence. Everything still had its old shape, but its soul had been replaced overnight. A lifetime could be erased that quickly. The porch, the windows, the magnolia trees I planted when Nathan was 9, all sat still, unable to speak, yet their silence weighed heavier than any accusation. I went to Mrs. Keller's house, the neighbor who had lived beside me for 30 years. I knocked gently, hoping for a bit of warmth from someone familiar. She opened the door, but her avoiding eyes told me my life had been pushed out of its old order. "Eleanor, you're back already?" Her voice trembled slightly, neither happy nor familiar. I asked if she knew what had happened while I was gone, but instead of answering, she glanced behind her door as if afraid someone would hear. "Your daughter-in-law said?" She hesitated, swallowing hard. "You sold the house to them." My heart sank like it fell into a deep, bottomless pit. I asked again to make sure I hadn't misheard, but Mrs. Keller only nodded slowly, painfully, as if she herself had been betrayed. My legs felt weak. Sold the house? I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to transfer anything. And that story was being spread to kill my credibility in the neighborhood. I forced my voice to stay steady and asked what else Alicia had said. Mrs. Keller sighed, her eyes full of regret. "Alicia said your memory's getting bad, that you forget things. that you signed the papers but don't remember. She said you've been paranoid thinking they mistreated you, so you left for a few days to clear your head. My chest tightened like someone had punched me. Alicia didn't just want the house. She wanted to stain my name, turn me into someone incapable so her story made sense. Everything fell into place. The text message, the changed lock, the neighbor's hesitant eyes, the house shutting me out. She had prepared every lie she needed. I stood on my own porch, looking at the steps where Nathan and I used to sit on summer afternoons. He was small then, sweat on his forehead from playing outside, and whenever he was tired, he would lean his head on my shoulder. Now he stood by silently as his wife erased my life from this home. Memories overturned, trust twisted. Humiliation clung to me like a shadow I could not shake. Night slowly fell. Lights in my house turned on, yet I could not enter. I saw Nathan's silhouette behind the curtains and Alicia walking across the kitchen looking comfortable as if she had belonged there forever. I tightened my grip. Even from outside, I could hear her soft laugh, an arrogant little sound that made my blood heat. She had taken my home and built lies to justify it. I knew that if I knocked now, Alicia would open the door with that polite, fake smile and tell me I had the wrong house or that I needed medical help. I knew her kind, the ones who used calmness like a mask to hide cruelty, and I knew if I confronted her without proof, she would flip the story in seconds. I turned away. The night wind brushed the back of my neck, not as cold as the humiliation weighing on me. I reminded myself I no longer had the luxury of retreat. If they dared to do this, I needed to find a way to stop it. As I reached the end of the yard, a memory hit me, the old metal box hidden in the basement. A box Alicia didn't know about, Nathan didn't know about. Inside it was the one thing that could restore justice for me. I remembered the secret metal box, the one Alicia never knew existed. I returned to the temporary room with the heavy suitcase behind me, and the memory of being abandoned at the airport still carved into every breath. Darkness covered the room, but what made me shiver was not the night, it was what I was about to open. The secret metal box lay under the bed where I had hidden the most important things of my life. All these years, only I knew it existed. I pulled it out and placed it on the table. The metal surface was as cold as the day Alicia pushed me out of the car. I turned the lock, the faint click sounding like a heartbeat, warning me of what was coming. In that moment, I knew this would be the first time I faced the raw truth about my son and the woman who had torn my family apart. Inside the box were worn folders, financial documents, original copies of my house papers, and a stack of files in the right corner. I picked it up, dust falling onto my hands. Between the papers was a thin transfer form, the kind Alicia must have thought I would never find. I opened it and my eyes stopped at the bottom where the signature was placed. The signature was shaky, weak, lacking pressure. I had signed thousands of documents in my life, even on days when my hand hurt from the weather. My signature was always steady, connected with a clear emphasis. But this one was crooked, as if someone tried to mimic without understanding. The first E lacked its curve. The downward stroke pulled to the right. Someone had written it in haste and hoped I would be deemed senile enough not to recognize my own signature. I put the paper down, my hand trembling slightly. The feeling of being impersonated, of having my ownership stolen by the very people I once shared a home with, made my chest tighten. That paper was not just a fake document. It was proof that Alicia saw me as an obstacle, an object that could be signed for, transferred for, decided for. I flipped to the next few sheets when a small device fell out. The old voice recorder I once used for field notes, still kept in the box because of habit. I had no memory of turning it on recently, yet the light on the side showed a new file. I opened the device and pressed play. Alicia's voice filled the room, sharp and cutting, like night wind slashing across my face. Once she signs, it's done. Dump her anywhere. Just don't let her come back. She's old, worthless. I sank back into the chair. I had heard cruel things in my life, had stood before bodies after storms, had watched people lose everything in a single gust of wind, but that voice hurt 100 times worse. Not because it was harsh, but because it came from the woman who had called me mother for more than 10 years. Nathan's voice entered next, quieter, hesitant, but without the strength to protest. Alicia, she's still... What? Alicia snapped. You want to carry that burden forever? I paused the recording. My chest felt crushed by a heavy stone. I once believed my son wasn't cruel enough to abandon me, but his silence in that recording said everything. He let Alicia speak, let her decide, let her plan how to throw me away like a piece of unwanted furniture. I slowly raised my hand to my face. Tears had fallen before I realized it. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I cried because I had been treated like waste, judged as a burden when I had spent my life carrying them through their hardships. I cried because of all the years in the kitchen, saving every dollar so Nathan could study well. I cried because the hopes I placed in my child had been shattered by a few cold words. I took a long breath, wiped my tears, and looked again at the box. Beneath all the pain, something told me there was still more. I brushed aside the stack of papers at the bottom. A sturdy document folder slid out. The paper inside was thicker, rougher, unlike the others. I opened it. Immediately, my eyes met the bright red text, original copy. Inside were all the real legal documents of the house, with my signature strong and intact, exactly as I had written it. Every seal, every stamp, every verification was indisputable. There was also a certified duplicate from the lawyer, confirming full ownership under my name. Alicia had no idea these existed. She thought a fake form in her sharp tongue could erase me from my own home. She didn't know that within the walls of that house, I had always kept the originals for a day like this. The original documents were in my hands, and I knew they would burn Alicia's entire scheme to ashes. When the original documents lay in my hands, the pain slowly gave way to another force, steady and quietly rising. I knew Alicia thought my whole life amounted to nothing more than that of an aging woman with a fading past. She didn't know my life had chapters I deliberately kept hidden, so no one would have to carry the weight of the memories carved into me from those years. But now that silent past had become the sharpest weapon I could use to fight back. I opened an old folder, its edges worn from years of hiding. It was something I had never shown Nathan, and certainly never mentioned to Alicia. 20 years ago, before retiring completely, I was part of a covert rescue unit under FEMA. Not the rescue teams people saw on the news, but the special unit called into the worst disaster zones where the chance of survival was near zero. People often saw the outcomes while the efforts behind them remained buried. I remembered Category 5 storms tearing boats apart like toys, floods swallowing entire roofs, wildfires whose hot winds clawed at the lungs. I had carried a child still blue from shock out of thick mud, carried an old man through water filled with broken debris, pulled hands of people convinced they would die that very day. No one knew these things, and I never demanded that anyone know because that was my mission, my duty at the time. My life had always been familiar with silence, and I chose to stay silent. I never bragged, never spoke of who I once was. I kept those honors tucked away in a drawer as if they belonged to someone else. To my neighbors, I was simply Eleanor, the gentle, widowed woman tending her garden or shopping early in the morning. I lived simply, letting my past rest in the shadows. But now, when everything I built was being trampled by Alicia's old and worthless, I understood that a part of the truth needed to step out of the dark. I turned to the last page of the folder. A certificate lay in the center, the blue ink still clear. Silent Hero of America. I received that title after my final mission, when a rescue helicopter crew was trapped in the eye of the storm and we had to guide them out of the death zone on our own. In government records, my name was listed among the silent workers, the ones who never appeared in articles or in front of cameras, but whose existence was preserved so the country would know they once served. I looked at the certificate for a long moment, not out of pride, but to remind myself that I had never been useless, as Alicia claimed. My life had saved strangers while she wanted to destroy her own mother-in-law for the sake of property. Between her and me, who was truly worthless, as she liked to say. I recalled what she had told Nathan the day I was driven out. Old people like her only drag everyone down. That sentence cut sharply. She didn't know that every cruel word she threw out was digging her own grave. The way Alicia underestimated me, saw me as a burden, assured she could control everything, all of it, would turn the truth into a hammer dropping onto her head. I placed the certificate back in the box. I stood up, seeing my reflection in the small window pane. My face had aged, but the eyes still held the strength of someone who had confronted nature itself to save lives. Alicia had no idea who she was up against, no idea she was facing a woman who had survived places where even storms bowed back. I needed an ally, and I knew exactly who I had to call. Franklin Hale. 20 years ago, he was the man I pulled from a car trapped under a fallen tree after a massive storm. Back then, he was young, shaken, blood running down his face, and I helped him out of danger. He had held my hand trembling and said, "I owe you my life." I had never collected that debt, but today was the day I needed it. I lifted the phone. My breath paused as the screen lit up. One call could turn the nightmare Alicia created upside down. I searched for Franklin's name in my contacts, the memory of the day I saved him rushing back. His name appeared, and I drew a deep breath. I pressed call, reaching out to Franklin, the man I had once pulled back from death 20 years ago. I stood inside Franklin Hale's office, the light from the window casting sharp lines across his serious face. The papers I brought were laid out on the table like sparks waiting to ignite. Franklin read each line, each stamp, each signature. He didn't ask questions or comment early. Only the sound of turning pages echoed steadily like the ticking clock before a storm breaks. When he placed the final sheet down, I knew he had seen everything clearly. I once saw his eyes when he was younger, the day I pulled him out of a car trapped under rising floodwater. But today, his eyes were sharper, stronger, as if he had exchanged roles from the man I saved to the man preparing to save me. Franklin folded his arms, his voice low and cold, like he was reading a verdict. "Eleanor, these are major criminal offenses." He pointed at each category in the file. Document forgery, elder abuse, property misappropriation, advanced fraud. If this goes to court, Alicia won't escape. I sat quietly, letting each word land like a bell ringing through the truth. He continued, now dissecting everything with precision, each sentence direct and exact like a surgeon's knife. The forged signature is crude, the legal basis is wrong, the transfer procedure invalid. She was too confident, and it made her sloppy at every step. He placed his pen down, his tone unwavering. Alicia has broken far more laws than you think. She didn't just try to take your home, she dug her own grave. I looked at him, feeling something heavy in my chest slowly open. These past days, I had wondered whether I was cornered, whether the steel box was enough to save me. Now I saw a way out, not a small path, but a road paved with evidence and law. Franklin leaned forward and met my eyes. "Eleanor, you haven't lost anything." His voice was firm, clear, echoing against the walls. "They're the ones losing their freedom." I didn't answer immediately. That sentence made my heart tremble, like someone was lighting a fire Alicia tried to extinguish. I didn't want revenge born from anger. I wanted revenge born from truth, from the law, from the very thing Alicia never expected me to use. Franklin opened his notebook and wrote quickly. Each stroke was sharp, decisive, as if sketching a blueprint for a large-scale operation. "The counterattack will be run like a military campaign, Eleanor. We strike where Alicia won't see it coming." I watched him outline each step. Step 1, verify the legal authenticity of the original documents. Step 2, gather additional evidence, including Alicia's recording. Step 3, choose the right stage to expose everything before the community. Step 4, move the case into formal criminal proceedings. I asked him why we needed a stage. Franklin raised his head, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly, his eyes cold with the insight of someone who understood human nature better than the law. Because Alicia loves putting on a show, we're giving her one, but this time she faces a real audience. I stayed silent. His reasoning reminded me of the days Alicia played the sweet daughter-in-law in front of neighbors, sighing about her confused mother-in-law, sprinkling in pity like sugar. She always needed witnesses, always needed an audience to validate her lies. Franklin understood that even better than I did. He stood, placed a hand on the file, then looked at me with a calculating steadiness. "I've already found the perfect place to expose her. A place where Alicia can't interrupt, can't run, and can't twist the story." I tilted my head, waiting. Franklin smiled, the kind of smile from someone who had already won the match. The town's civic honor ceremony. More than 500 people, media coverage, the council, the police, everyone who matters. He paused. "And the best part, you'll be honored there too." My body went cold for a moment, but not from fear. It was the same feeling I had before stepping into the eye of a storm, clear, focused, knowing that if I did it right, the storm wouldn't defeat me. Franklin gathered the documents and handed me a clean draft of the plan, his handwriting tight and firm. "Everything begins at that ceremony. Alicia won't understand what's happening until it's too late." I looked out the office window. The late sunlight glowed over the roofs of the town I once called home. In a few days, that same place would witness a different kind of truth, one Alicia never expected to be revealed. Franklin concluded that the perfect stage to expose Alicia would be the town's civic honor ceremony. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling, as if the world had shifted slightly toward justice. Franklin had outlined every step, preparing everything like a campaign aimed straight at Alicia's weakest point. I knew I was about to take everything back, but I didn't expect Alicia to dig her own grave this quickly. While I was sitting in the small motel room thinking about the upcoming ceremony, my phone buzzed. My neighbor Daisy sent me a screenshot. The moment I saw the notification line, my heart tightened and then seized as if someone had grabbed it. "Eleanor, you need to see this." I opened it, and what appeared made the anger in me harden into something sharper than steel. Alicia stood in front of my house, her hand resting on the doorframe like a cheap queen claiming new territory. Her face wore a smile that outsiders might see as radiant, but to me, it was the grin of someone standing on the ashes she had just set. Under the photo, she wrote in shiny, polished letters, "New start, new home." I stared at the photo. The door behind her was the door I had painted myself after the storm years ago. The step she stood on still had scratches from the day I rescued a lost cat. Every detail held my memories, and there Alicia stood as if she had won a trophy. Another image appeared. This time my breath stopped. Alicia had posted the house transfer document she proudly wanted the world to see. A forged transfer, a fake signature, an invalid stamp, wrong dates, wrong clauses. Franklin once said she was overly confident. I didn't believe him, but now I did. I immediately sent the images to Franklin. 3 minutes later, he called back, his voice steady, carrying the calm authority of someone who had just watched an opponent submit their confession. Eleanor, she just photographed her own crimes. Every word, every image, every detail is evidence. I've saved everything. I heard the taps of his keyboard, saving, capturing, annotating. Each action sounded like a hammer sealing Alicia's own coffin. She posted it publicly, Franklin publicly, very publicly. And even better, I see her replying to friends as if this is some grand achievement. Those comments will help us immensely. I closed my eyes, imagining Alicia somewhere, holding her phone, smiling because she thought she had erased me. I doubted she knew that what she had just posted carried the weight of a confession shouted in the town square. But what hit me harder wasn't the documents. It was a short video Daisy sent afterward. Alicia walked slowly through my house, her voice carrying a smug tone as she said, "Finally, ours for real. She's not coming back. Everything is legal." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A part of me hurt at her voice, but a far greater part realized this Alicia wasn't just confident, she was foolish enough to record her crimes and publicly display them. Franklin would enjoy this. I sent him the video and asked Franklin, "Is it enough?" He answered immediately, "More than enough. She has paved her own path to downfall." That afternoon, when Franklin and I met again to review the plan, he leaned back in his chair, fingers locked together, his eyes sharp. "Eleanor, we no longer need to chase her. She's walking straight into the law by herself." He placed his phone on the table and turned the screen toward me. "Look, she even uploaded the PDF version of the forged deed to a community group. This is the second time she's posted her own crime in a matter of hours." I looked at Franklin, then at the screen. Alicia was digging under her own feet. I realized then that some villains don't need to be pushed to the edge. All they need is enough arrogance and greed. Franklin saved every link, every image, every comment. Each file time-stamped, each of Alicia's actions recorded like a self-destructive trail. "We're only missing one thing," he said. "I know," I replied, "the ceremony." Franklin nodded. "The ceremony will have 500 people. She can't run, can't interrupt, can't explain. There, we won't just take everything back. The town will finally see her true face." I sat quietly for a few seconds. In just a few days, Alicia would stand under the eyes of the entire community, where every lie she told would collapse. We waited for the ceremony where 500 people would witness the moment Alicia was unmasked before justice. This year's honor ceremony was larger than any before, the atmosphere lively, like a festival for the whole town. I stood behind the stage, hearing people talking, chairs sliding, speakers being tested. Every sound reminded me of the days I stood in the center of storms, where each small movement signaled something bigger approaching. Today was the same, except this storm wasn't nature. It was truth waiting to be revealed. Alicia appeared in the hall with Nathan beside her, as if they were the model couple of the town. I saw the neighbors' eyes turn toward them, no longer with suspicion, but with a touch of curious admiration. This was exactly the environment Alicia loved most, where she had an audience, where she could finish performing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law she had crafted for months. Nathan looked around uneasy, but Alicia gripped his hand tightly as if the moment he let go, her entire performance would collapse. She wore a sparkling blue dress, her hair curled into perfect waves, her face done up to hide whatever truth lay underneath. Then she approached me, offering a smile so fake it made me want to look away. She stepped closer, placing her hand on my elbow like a loving family member. "Remember to thank us for everything, Mom." Her voice was low enough that no one else could hear, but sharp enough to cut. I looked at her, keeping my face steady. Inside, there was no anger left, only clarity. The woman before me was taking her final steps on the rotting plank she had nailed herself. I replied softly, each word deliberate. "Don't worry, I will thank you properly." Alicia paused for a heartbeat, unsure whether I meant sincerity or warning. Nathan forced a polite smile, patting my hand like a dutiful son trying to uphold his image. I looked at him and saw only exhaustion, something I had missed before, like he had been living in the shadow of a woman who told him what to do, what to think, what to believe. The hall settled as everyone found their seats. Flags lined both walls and soft lights shone over the framed portraits of past honorees. I was placed in the front row, a seat Alicia believed she helped secure for me. She sat directly behind me, her high heels tapping the wooden floor like the heartbeat of someone eager for praise. Franklin stood near the organizing committee, a folder in hand, giving me a small signal. Everything was ready. We were only waiting for the moment. The host walked onto the stage, his voice strong through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to honor the silent contributions and noble acts of our town's citizens." I heard Alicia inhale behind me. She thought I would offer sweet words of gratitude, smoothing over every misunderstanding, perhaps even crediting her for her support. She thought the spotlight shining on me today was hers by extension. "The next name," the host continued, "is a woman known to our town for her gentle smile and dedication to the community." Alicia whispered behind me, "Say it right, Mom. Don't make things difficult for us in front of everyone." I didn't turn back. I simply took a slow breath. Franklin stood near the stage, eyes locked on me. The host flipped a page, pausing long enough for the hall to fall silent. The stage lights brightened, sweeping across the front rows. I felt the warmth of the beam settle on my skin. Then his voice cut through the silence like a bell. "Eleanor Marston, silent hero of America." A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Alicia stood up abruptly. Nathan's mouth fell open. Several people turned to look at me as if seeing me for the first time. Alicia gripped my shoulder, her voice trembling but trying to stay composed. "Mom, what is this? Why is it you?" Her words drowned under the growing applause. I rose, feeling the entire room looking at me, not with pity, but with respect. Alicia had never imagined existed. I stepped onto the stage and saw Franklin moving toward the microphone, ready to begin the unmasking. Alicia would not escape. Applause rose like a great wave rolling across the hall. I stood under the spotlight, feeling as though the hidden layers of my past were lifting, glowing beneath hundreds of eyes fixed on me. The host placed the Lifetime Contribution Medal in my hands, a medal so heavy I had to breathe softly, not because of the medal itself, but because of the memories it carried. The moments I once waded through floods, stood in the center of storms, held the last surviving hands of strangers, all of them surged back in a single heartbeat. I bowed in gratitude, and when I looked up, everyone in the hall was standing. Their applause grew louder, more genuine, as if they could finally sense the silent work I had buried for years. I spotted Daisy from a distant row, her eyes glistening as though she finally realized I had never been the weak woman Alicia humiliated. Only one person remained still, Alicia. She stood behind me, her face drained so pale that even her heavy makeup couldn't hide it. Nathan stood at her side, not daring to touch her, his arms hanging lifeless as though all sensation had been stripped away. Alicia tried to hold a smile, but the corners of her lips twitched, ready to collapse. Through the echoing applause, Alicia stuttered her voice, trembling so faintly I had to tilt my head to catch it. "No, this can't be. She's just a useless old woman." I turned slowly, saying nothing. The lights swept across her face, revealing every line, distorted by panic. That was the moment I knew she recognized the collapse of everything she had built. Franklin stepped out from backstage, his posture firm, carrying the quiet authority of a storm about to break. He approached the microphone, adjusted it, and scanned the room. All 500 people fell silent. The applause faded, replaced by anticipation. He began speaking, his voice deep like thunder across clear sky. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have honored a citizen who has dedicated her life to this community. But this ceremony holds another important purpose." Eyes from every corner of the hall turned toward him. Alicia gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Nathan stared at the floor, his entire body tense. Franklin continued, "As the authorized attorney of Mrs. Eleanor Marston, I will now present the truth about her home. A home that was taken through forged documents, the exploitation of trust, and the manipulation of family ties." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some people looked at Alicia, noticing the strange mismatch between her glamorous appearance and the terror now washing over her features. Franklin lifted his head, his gaze cutting through the air like a blade through deceit. "Today, before this entire community, we will reveal the evidence of forgery, property theft, and elder abuse." Alicia let out a tiny gasp, trying to speak over him. "Wait, this is an honor ceremony." Not Franklin turned, facing her directly, his expression cold enough to make the hall's temperature drop. "Miss Alicia, truth does not wait for convenience, especially truth about crime." Whispers broke out across the hall, some sharp with shock, others thick with outrage. I remained still, feeling a piece of the pain I had carried finally rising from the depths. I no longer needed to say a word. Truth would speak for me today. Franklin raised his hand toward the large LED screen behind the stage. "Now, let us hear what the person involved had to say." Lights in the room dimmed, dipping the hall into a tense hush. I could hear Alicia's unsteady breathing. Her hands trembled violently, fingers locking together like she was searching for anything to hold on to. I glanced at Nathan. He kept his head down, shoulders quivering. He already understood what was about to happen, perhaps realizing he too had been pulled into Alicia's darkness deeper than he ever intended. Franklin nodded to the technician. A single click echoed. The LED screen lit up. Alicia's voice filled the vast hall, clear and sharp like a blade cutting through air. "Once she signs, it's done. Dump her anywhere you want. She's old, worthless." The hall went silent. A few gasps, a whispered, "Oh my God." A scrape of chairs against the floor echoed like verdicts. I watched Alicia. She stood frozen, drained of color, eyes wide, one hand covering her mouth, as if she could swallow her own words back. On the screen, the recording slid to the next vicious sentence, ready to expose Alicia's entire true nature before 500 breathless witnesses. The sound in the hall seemed squeezed tight just before the next recording burst out. Then Alicia's voice, painfully clear, echoed across all 500 seats holding their breath. "Dump her at the airport fast. This house is mine." The atmosphere exploded like a grenade pulled free. Gasps, scraping chairs, and bursts of outrage rippled across the hall. I saw people who used to have dinner with Alicia turn toward her with the eyes of someone who realized they had trusted a demon. Some stood up, shaking their heads in disgust. Others covered their mouths as if they wanted to spit out every bit of respect they had once given her. Alicia collapsed into the chair behind me, her hands trembling, her makeup smearing like oil spreading across water. Nathan sat frozen, his fingers knotted tightly, his eyes reddening with humiliation. He avoided looking at me and avoided looking at the crowd, as though he finally understood he had traded family for the wrong person. The recording slid to the next line, each sentence, a needle stabbing into the polished facade Alicia had crafted. "Once she signs, it's done. This house should be mine. She's too old anyway. What's the point of her living?" The hall erupted in fury. I heard, "Oh my God, how can she say that? So cruel," and even a hiss of rage from a mother somewhere in the back. Not a single person sat still. Outrage spread like electricity through the rows. Franklin stepped closer, placing a steady hand on my back. I inhaled deeply and walked toward the microphone. My footsteps echoed across the hall, which had gone silent again, except for the faint vibration of the speakers. I faced the crowd. My voice did not shake. I didn't look back at Alicia. My words rang out solid and clear, like a stone dropping into still water. "This is the family that threw me out of their lives." I paused, letting the room compress around the words. But the law didn't do that. More whispers, but this time filled with support. I saw Daisy's face bright with pride, a pride I never expected to receive. A few men stood and placed their hands over their chests in respect. Truth stood with me, strong as any ally. Franklin stepped forward, carrying the folder he had prepared a week before. He opened it, holding it high under the stage lights. "This house," he declared, "belongs to Eleanor Marston." A wave of emotion burst across the hall. He continued, his voice sharp as a final verdict. "Alicia Boyd and Nathan Boyd are hereby charged with document forgery, property theft, elder exploitation, and deliberate fraud." Alicia shot up from her chair, eyes blazing red, clutching Nathan as if he could pull her out of the truth, swallowing her. "No, Franklin, you can't do this. This is a misunderstanding. Nathan, say something." But Nathan said nothing. He stared down, shoulders collapsing, as though he had spent all his strength enduring the truth he now had to face. A tear slipped down his cheek, not for me, but because he knew he had followed her too far. Franklin turned to her, his tone icy, shaped by everything he had witnessed from her cruelty. "The court will handle the rest. Here we are simply announcing the truth." The entire hall rose to its feet, not to honor, but to witness the downfall of the woman who had been unmasked. Phones were raised, recording Alicia, shaking, stepping back as if the light itself was forcing her into a corner. Then I heard heavy footsteps, measured, steady, coming from the main entrance, the sound of police boots. Police officers stepped onto the stage, advancing toward Alicia and Nathan, while the entire hall fell silent, ready to witness the final moment of their unmasking. The police stepped onto the stage, the sound of their boots striking the floor, echoing through a silence that felt carved out of stone. I stood there no longer in the position of a victim, but as someone who had survived the longest storm of her life. Alicia stammered, and Nathan kept his head down, his whole body seeming to collapse inward. The stage lights remained bright, shining straight into a truth neither of them could run from. The judgment had already begun the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. Weeks later, the official trial opened. I sat in the front row, Franklin beside me, while Alicia was led in, looking so withered she was barely recognizable. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes, but there was no arrogance left, no triumphant smile that had haunted me for 3 years. Nathan followed right behind her, his hands cuffed at his stomach, his walk slow and hollow, like a man who had lost every reason to stand. The courtroom was full. Everyone wanted to witness the ending they had waited for ever since that ceremony. The judge read the sentence with a cold, steady voice. Alicia Boyd for falsifying documents, elder abuse, asset fraud, and intentional property theft is sentenced to 1 year in prison, 3 years of probation, maximum financial penalties as defined by law, permanent revocation of professional license, 1,000 hours of community service, and a lifetime restraining order from Eleanor Marston. I heard each word like small stones dropping into still water, clean and decisive. Alicia collapsed into her chair, lips trembling violently. An officer had to help her stand because her legs could no longer hold her. Then the judge turned to Nathan. Nathan Boyd, for aiding, covering up, and enabling elder abuse, is sentenced to 18 months of suspended jail time, fines, and a permanent entry of the offense into legal records. Nathan did not lift his head. His hair fell over his forehead, hiding his eyes, but not the remorse rolling through his trembling shoulders. I looked at him for a long moment. Nathan was the child I once carried, once walked to school, once waited for by the window when he came home late. The pain was still there, but today's sentence was not to destroy him, but to remind him of the price of choosing silence. The judge flipped another page. The assets under Alicia Boyd's name will be seized to compensate Eleanor Marston for damages. All funds taken, including savings, unauthorized withdrawals, and personal expenditures must be repaid in full. I heard Franklin exhale softly, as if he had finally removed a massive stone from his chest. As for me, I closed my eyes for a moment, not to celebrate, but to thank whatever mercy remained in this world for those pushed into darkness for too long. On the day I received the keys to my home again, I stood before my own door. The door Alicia once used as a backdrop to post "New Start, New Home" now sat still and quiet after the police seal was removed. I breathed deeply, laid my hand on the wood grain I knew as well as the lines of my palm. "I'm home," I whispered. When the door opened, the house seemed to breathe with me, a long, soft exhale, as if it had also been waiting for this moment. Light spilled into the living room where my old reading chair still stood. I walked through each room, every step returning a piece of my life. No more Alicia's cold laughter. No more her voice giving orders. No more eyes filled with contempt pressing into my spine. That afternoon, the neighbors came. Daisy was the first to throw her arms around me, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Eleanor, you were never alone," she said, her hands gripping my shoulders. "You were just quiet for too long." Others gathered, offering embraces, congratulations, and looks of warmth I never thought I would receive again. But they were there, and I understood kindness sometimes waits longer than we expect, but it never disappears. During tea, Franklin leaned back in his chair, holding a warm cup between his palms, a rare smile curving his lips. "Justice has done its part," he said. I nodded. "I know, and I've done mine." When everyone left, the house became quiet again. I stood by the window watching the sunset fall over the neighborhood I had lived in my entire life. The sky glowed with a long streak of amber, as if drawing one final line under a chapter filled with pain. I spoke aloud, not to anyone else, but to myself. They thought abandoning me at the airport would erase me from their lives, but justice put them exactly where they belonged. The words settled inside me like a perfect period at the end of a long, brutal sentence. And I understood something. Justice may come late, but it never leaves anyone behind.